All right, let's get started with chapter 12, Away from Broadway. So, what's going on elsewhere? We're going to talk a little bit about off Broadway stuff. We're going to talk about Hair and then Hedwig and the Angry Inch. This is a little bit shorter than some of the other videos, but that's okay. I can't imagine you'll mind that too much. Off Broadway sometimes just literally meant on a different street somewhere in New York. And sometimes it's synonymous with work that's experimental, with Broadway being defined as for mass culture, larger audiences, off Broadway being defined as, something new or maybe not for everyone. So in that case, it's sometimes more overtly political. You have some like WPA shows like Cradle Will Rock, um, other alternative musicals like, Three Penny Opera, where you're very far off Broadway if you're in, Berlin. And then you have a show like The Fantastics with relatively minimalist sets because they had such a small theater and they had a small cast and a relatively simple tale of fantasy and romance where the parents are trying to get the children together, and in doing so they forbid them from seeing each other, which makes them want to be together, etc., etc. A cute set of reversals. And it played for 42 years, partly because they didn't have to sell that many tickets to keep it going. And because people like stories like that. So off-Broadway can mean a number of things, and has meant different things historically. So we're going to talk about two experimental shows that seem to have really interesting resonance for their cultures. Hair is the first one, which I think was originally called the American Tribal Love Rock Musical, and the cast, rather than being called the chorus, was referred to as the tribe. We know this is more problematic now, obviously. In the 1960s, when it kind of came out of counterculture, it didn't feel that way. It was sort of, you know, claiming a title for youth who felt disenfranchised and not considered politically in many ways. And so, it's written about its own political climate, which does not uh, often happen. Often what happens is someone looks at a time period in the past in order to work out current issues. I mean, if you look at Hamilton, that's kind of what you see. Um, but it's about 60s counterculture. It's about by and starring hippies. It's responding directly to the Vietnam War by talking about the Vietnam War while that war is happening. This is a very rare occurrence. In terms of generational change, you have much younger creators and cast than were working in the past. If you think about the previous musicals we've talked about, I mean, if you have Guys and Dolls as an example, I mean, everyone involved with that is a much older generation than the people who are making Hair. It's important to kind of separate that out. Looser structure than other shows. A lot of it was sort of developed and adapted over time. And they were very intentional on mixing kind of counterculture with high culture. There's a Hamlet monologue, but there's also, a song about body parts, where the guy's singing about his ass. And a song about sodomy. There's all kinds of things. And what that shows is, yes, we are literate and our bodies matter too. And it created actual hit singles. I mean, these people were good at writing music, that was of its moment. The Age of Aquarius, the song Hair itself. The song about body parts, which is called I Got My, it was covered by Nina Simone, who's just this amazing singer. So, definitely Hair has a lot to say to its culture then, but, had broader resonance. One of the most important, I think, performances at the Tony Awards in history, period, is when Hair was out and was nominated and was, relatively new to Broadway. The audience is mostly old white people, many conservative people. You do not have an integrated Broadway really at this time. This is during the Vietnam War, which the actors, the characters, the writers were protesting. And a lot of people put out pretty patriotic content who were in this audience. Who would have assumed, of course, you're going to serve in whatever war is happening. That's just part of what you do. But the contrast between the relatively quiet audience and the angry young people in the cast is just energizing in a really kind of, I don't know, heartrending way. You see these people who are trying to plead with an audience that doesn't seem that motivated to help them. They line up at the very end to sing, and they confront the audience that way, in this sort of Brechtian way we've talked about. And there's some applause at the end, but certainly when you would expect a lot more. Does this show succeed at trying to wake up its audience? So make sure you watch this clip and take a look and think about what you notice there compared to some of the other staging and casting, performance, choreography that we've discussed. And we're going to skip ahead like a couple of decades to talk a little bit about Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And this was, very much an off-Broadway kind of genesis. But the setting of it was very much designed to be off-Broadway. So it's John Cameron Mitchell, who is going to play the Tiger King guy, or already has. So if you see him in something today, it'll probably be that. And Stephen Trask. And they wrote the book, lyrics, and musical collaboratively. Mitchell starred in it as Hedwig. And the concept of it is that we're watching a small rock band play gigs in smaller venues, hence the sort of off-Broadway vibe, while following the tour of a big rock band. So there's this implicit elsewhere that exists, which is headlined by a glam rock-esque fictional star named Tommy Gnosis. And the lead singer of the little band is genderqueer glam rocker Hedwig. Yitzhak is a drag king who's in the background band, so it's already kind of doing different things, especially in like the late 90s, like 98-ish is when this is out. Especially back then, you don't have as much representation for these groups, especially not in major commercial venues. And, Hedwig kind of became one of the big off-Broadway kind of places. And obviously now, Neil Patrick Harris and other, I think Darren Criss maybe, these bigger stars played Hedwig. And so, then like everything is mainstream and there's a film and all this stuff. So it kind of started small and grew very big. This sort of fictional biography of Hedwig, Mitchell lived in Germany as a military brat growing up, so some of this is inspired by that. So Hedwig is born Hansel in East Germany, undergoes, and they sing about it, so you'll hear all about it, semi-unsuccessful surgery to live as the wife of an American GI, while not self-identifying as trans. And it was written during a time when many lacked a full vocabulary to discuss gender and sexuality, in particular genderqueer issues, trans issues. At the time it's described as a botched sex change, which we would not really describe today. And it wasn't considered Hedwig's gender identity. And one of the things that, does feel very authentic about it is this connection of rock star identity and, being able to express your gender differently. I mean, that's been the same since the sort of 70s era, David Bowie, androgyny, Mark Bolan, T-Rex kind of, expression of glam. So that's kind of where Hedwig lands. And she eventually becomes a rock star, falls in love with Tommy, who is also androgynous in a different way, who steals her songs. And so, the songs themselves are inspired by the sort of glam rock era, as mentioned, merged with musical theater, some queer camp. And, a lot of people enjoy playing this part because, the songs are great. The character is sympathetic. There's something unique and unusual about all of the plot. It's very rich. There's even, a little bit of, Plato in it. And, so here are two of the different interpretations, and you can certainly find more out there. Neil Patrick Harris as Hedwig singing Sugar Daddy. It's very different in the film, so you could, watch both if you wish. And then there's John Cameron Mitchell singing Wig in a Box. So they're both pretty different songs, but they're both very catchy as well. So, hopefully Hare and Hedwig are a good beginning for ways to understand off Broadway and its intersections with culture, but also its intersections with kind of some of the more conservative elements of Broadway itself.